The sun was retreating behind the hills of Karsdale Valley, its golden hue cloaking the rolling fields in warmth, as if kissing them good night. Elias Thorne, a widowed farmer in his early 40s with calloused hands and a heart both weathered and loyal, was trudging back to his farmhouse after a long day in the fields. Life had carved lines into his face, not from bitterness, but from years of honest toil, solitude, and quiet acceptance. He heard it before he saw it, a screech of tires followed by the thunderous crash of metal colliding with rock. His instincts kicked in. Elias dropped his tools, sprinting down the dirt path that curved through the hill's edge toward the main road. There, teetering dangerously near the ravine, was a white sedan, smoke spiraling from its hood. Without hesitation, he yanked open the crumpled driver's side door and found a woman slumped over the wheel, her forehead bleeding. "Stay with me," he muttered, lifting her gently into his arms as if she weighed nothing. The woman, semi-conscious, whispered something incoherent before falling into the shadows of unconsciousness. He carried her to his farmhouse, miles from the nearest town, where he nursed her wounds with clumsy but careful hands. Over the next 2 days, she stirred in and out of feverish sleep. When she finally awoke, her voice was raspy, and her eyes scanned the room in confusion. "You're safe," Elias said softly, sitting beside her with a mug of herbal tea. "You've had a nasty crash. I'm Elias. You're at my farm." She blinked, slowly absorbing her surroundings. "My name is Celeste," she said faintly, then looked down at the tea. "You saved me." He nodded. "I did what anyone should do. But not everyone would have done what Elias did." Celeste wasn't just any traveler. She was a successful architect from the city, fleeing a life that looked perfect on paper but felt hollow in the soul. A life suffocating in deadlines, expectations, and a loveless engagement to a man chosen more by strategy than sentiment. As days melted into weeks, Celeste recovered, but her gratitude transformed into something more curious. She began asking questions about the crops Elias planted, the tools he used, the quiet rhythm of his days. And he, usually reticent, found himself speaking freely, almost surprised by how much he wanted to share. She learned about the loss of his wife, about the daughter he never had, about the way the earth spoke if one only listened. Celeste started helping around the farm. She learned how to mend fences, how to sow seeds, and even how to milk a stubborn goat. It was awkward at first, her city hands fumbling with everything, but her laughter, light, unfiltered, filled the spaces that had been empty in Elias's life for years. One evening, as fireflies lit the porch like floating stars, she handed him a small drawing. It was a rough sketch of a new barn, elegant, functional, and designed with a beauty his humble fields had never seen. "You don't need to build it," she said shyly. "I just thought you should see what I see when I look at this place." Elias stared at the sketch, and then at her. "No one's ever drawn my life before," he said. She looked down, her cheeks warming. Maybe no one ever stopped long enough to see it. Their connection was no longer a question. It was a current, slow and certain, carving a new path into both their hearts. But reality crept in like fog. One morning, Celeste received a call from her assistant. Her company was in turmoil without her, and her fiancé, ex-fiancé now, had made a scene in the press about her disappearance. She stood in the hallway, phone clutched tight, shoulders stiff with conflict. Elias walked in with a basket of eggs, and one look at her face told him something had shifted. "You'll have to go," he said, not as a question, but as a truth he'd long prepared for. "I don't want to," she whispered. "Not really." "But you will," he replied, setting the basket down gently. "Because people like you don't stay." She stepped forward, gripping his hand. "Don't you ever say that again. People like me don't find peace like this anywhere else." He met her gaze, eyes full of unspoken hope and resignation. "Then don't leave it behind." Celeste did leave, temporarily. She returned to the city, not to resume her old life, but to end it properly. She handed in her resignation. She sold her high-rise apartment. And when the media noise quieted, when the last paper was signed, she returned to Karsdale not with suitcases, but with blueprints, books, and a single suitcase. The day she returned, Elias was by the field, repairing the wheel of an old cart. He turned at the sound of her voice. "You owe me a barn," she said, waving the drawings. He smiled, a slow, rare smile that touched his eyes. "Only if you help me build it." They worked side by side, not just on the barn, but on something deeper, on a life neither had expected. The townspeople began noticing the change in Elias. He laughed more, lingered at the market longer, even joined the harvest festival for the first time in years. Celeste, too, became part of the valley, a curious mix of outsider and kin, whose hands slowly grew calloused and whose heart grew roots in the soil. One evening, under the half-finished rafters of their barn, Elias asked, "Do you ever miss the life you left?" Celeste leaned back, gazing at the stars through the beams. "Sometimes I miss the view, but not the feeling." "What feeling?" "Loneliness, even in a crowd. You took that away without trying to." He reached for her hand, rough and warm. "You gave me color again." And though they never named what was blooming between them with rushed declarations or scripted confessions, it was understood. In the quiet moments, in shared glances, in building something both with wood and with faith, it was love. A slow, seasoned love, not born of rescue but recognition. From a single moment of compassion on a broken road, their lives had been rewritten. The valley whispered of miracles and murmurs carried by the wind. And sometimes, miracles looked like a humble farmer and a runaway architect, building not just a barn, but a forever forged in the most unexpected soil. Forged in the most unexpected soil. Summer in Karsdale swelled around them with a quiet, golden authority. The fields stretched green and proud beneath the sky, and the barn, still a skeleton of beams and promise, rose a little higher each day. Celeste had taken to sketching under the shade of the willow tree while Elias worked nearby, hammering and humming old songs only he remembered. The days were measured not by clocks but by the shifting light, the angle of the sun on the hills, and the way the birds changed their tune by mid-afternoon. But not everything was peaceful. One morning, a letter arrived. It was postmarked from the city, its envelope crisp and out of place among the stack of seed catalogs and local newsletters. Celeste opened it with trembling fingers while Elias watched from the porch, a subtle tension in his frame. She read in silence, then folded it and placed it in her pocket, her expression unreadable. "You all right?" he asked gently. "It's from my father," she replied after a pause. "He's never written to me before." Elias waited, giving her space. "He wants to visit. Says he's curious about the man who replaced Manhattan." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Am I supposed to be honored or interrogated?" "Both, probably," she said with a small smile, though her eyes lingered on the distant ridge. "He never liked anything that didn't come with a stock portfolio." Elias nodded. "Well, I've got a solid investment in wheat and cows." They both laughed, but beneath the humor was a quiet apprehension. When Mr. Holloway arrived, he did so in a gleaming black sedan, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it had never known a wrinkle. The contrast between him and the dusty road was stark, as if two separate worlds had collided in one frame. Celeste introduced him with cautious affection. Elias extended a strong hand, and the older man took it without flinching. "I imagined something more rustic," Mr. Holloway said, glancing around. "This is rustic," Elias replied, his voice neutral but not cold. "You're standing in my idea of paradise." Mr. Holloway's eyes softened, if only slightly. "I can see that my daughter's fond of this place." "She's more than fond," Elias said, meeting his gaze. "She's part of it now." The old man studied the barn, the fields, the way Celeste walked barefoot through the grass without hesitation. Something shifted in his stance. Perhaps not approval, but a begrudging understanding. That night, over a modest dinner of roast chicken and garden vegetables, they spoke of city deals and harvests, of childhoods and regrets, and slowly walls lowered. Mr. Holloway retired early, and Celeste stood on the porch beside Elias, arms folded against the cool air. "I didn't think he'd come," she admitted. "I didn't think he'd see me." "He sees you," Elias murmured. "But more importantly, I do." She looked at him, and in that moment, the gravity of belonging settled over her like a warm blanket. The barn was finished by autumn. It stood proud and strong, the beams stained with cedar oil and sunlight, each nail a testament to their shared labor. The valley celebrated with them. Neighbors brought pies and cider, and old Miss Weatherby from 2 farms down insisted on bringing her accordion, which resulted in a clumsy but joyous dance in the lantern-lit clearing. Later that night, when the guests had gone and silence wrapped the fields once more, Elias led Celeste inside the barn. The scent of fresh wood mingled with hay and lavender bundles tied to the rafters. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box, carved by hand. Inside, nestled in wool, was a ring. Not extravagant, but beautiful, silver, shaped like a vine curling into itself, with a tiny peridot at the center. "It's not a proposal," he said quickly. "Not yet. I just wanted something, to show you that this isn't a dream I'll wake from." Celeste held it like it was made of breath. "I don't need time," she said, her voice soft. "I've already chosen." She slipped the ring onto her finger and took his hand in both of hers. No speeches, no rehearsed words, just the warmth of two hearts speaking the same silent language. The seasons shifted again. Winter came, blanketing the farm in white. The barn now held not just tools and feed, but warmth. Celeste turned it into a studio, where she designed homes for the valley, simple, beautiful structures that honored the land. People came from nearby towns, intrigued by her ability to make practical things poetic. She called it rooted design, and at the bottom of every blueprint, beneath the measurements and materials, she wrote one line: "Made where love grows wild." Elias watched her evolve like the landscape itself, graceful, grounded, luminous. He worked beside her, sometimes in silence, sometimes in laughter, always aware that what they'd built could never be measured in bricks or profit. It was something richer, something lived. Then came spring's thaw, with rain-soaked earth and fields yearning to be tilled. Life pulsed through the valley again, and so did something else: possibility. One morning, as the sun pushed through the last of the fog, Celeste stood on the edge of the field with a hand resting gently over her stomach. Elias approached from behind, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You feel it too, don't you?" she whispered. He didn't need to ask what she meant. He nodded, his chin brushing her hair. "I've never been more certain of anything." They didn't tell anyone right away. Some things they knew were sweeter when left to ripen on their own. They kept the secret between them, tending to it like a new seedling, quietly, tenderly. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled across the distant hills, they sat together by the hearth. Elias was carving another wooden box, and Celeste was curled up beside him with her sketchpad. "Did you ever think," she murmured, "that stopping your day to help a stranger would change your whole life?" He looked up, eyes crinkling with memory. "I didn't think. I acted. I just knew someone needed help." Celeste smiled. "That's why it mattered." He set the carving aside and took her hand. No storm that night, no twist in that road, no kindness shown. None of it was coincidence. "I think life brings people together in strange ways, but only the open-hearted recognize the gift." She leaned into him. "Then maybe this, us, is the universe's apology for everything we lost." Outside, the rain softened into mist, and the fields shimmered like a dream not yet told. The seasons in Karsdale continued to dance their eternal waltz, soft spring blooming into golden summer, summer folding into auburn autumn, and winter blanketing everything with hush and memory. Time, once measured in deadlines and lost hours, now passed through the rhythm of harvests, firewood stacked high, the cries of newborn lambs, and the sigh of the wind brushing through tall grass like a whisper from another world. Elias and Celeste lived quietly but deeply, not needing grand declarations or spectacle to define their love. Their story had already become something whispered about in the valley. How a city woman had fallen not just for a man, but for the soul of the land itself, and how a man who thought his heart had long since been buried with the woman he lost found it beating again in the light of another's eyes. But their love was never about fairy tales. It was about healing, about tending to unseen wounds the way Elias tended to the roots of his apple trees, gently, patiently, knowing that what flourishes above ground is always fed by what is mended beneath it. On the day their child was born, the skies above the valley were streaked with sunlight and drifting clouds, the kind that seemed painted by some ancient hand. Celeste's labor was long but quiet, like everything else in her life that had ever mattered. Elias never left her side. Not once. His rough hands, so used to the earth and the tools of his trade, now held hers like the most delicate thing he'd ever known. When the baby cried for the first time, it wasn't loud. It was more like a soft melody breaking through the air, a song waiting to be sung. Elias wept. Not with noise or drama, but with the quiet reverence of a man who'd lost everything once and now held in his arms something he never dared to dream of again: legacy. Love. Life renewed. They named her Alina. The townspeople brought baskets of bread, quilts stitched with care, and jars of wildflower honey. Old Miss Weatherby declared Alina's eyes wiser than the preacher's dog, and the blacksmith wept into his apron when he first held her, mumbling something about the prettiest thing this side of heaven. And the valley, as if aware of the miracle it had midwifed, seemed to bloom brighter that year. The rains came just when the soil needed them. The wheat stood tall. Even the stubborn old pear tree near the well bore fruit for the first time in decades. Celeste, as a mother, glowed with a grace Elias had only seen once before. when she used to stand beneath the half-built barn, head tilted to the sky, envisioning the future. Now, that future slept nestled against her chest, fingers curled like flower petals. Elias built a wooden cradle by hand, each curve carved with patience, each joint smoothed with love. On its base, he etched a line he once whispered to Celeste beneath the willow tree. Asterisk planted by grace, watered with kindness, grown in love. Asterisk. Life wasn't always easy. There were storms that flooded the lower fields and moments of fatigue when the weight of responsibility seemed too much. There were arguments, too, over finances, over which roof tiles to use for the guest house Celeste was designing, or whether Alina should learn violin or woodworking first. But there was never doubt. One evening, years later, when Alina was old enough to run through the fields with wild braids and mud-streaked legs, Celeste found herself watching Elias from the window. He was teaching their daughter how to repair a fence post, his hands guiding hers over the grain of the wood, his voice low and patient. The sight moved her in ways she couldn't name. He wasn't just her partner. He was her mirror, her home, her proof that love, when found unexpectedly, blooms with a richness earned only through pain and perseverance. That night, she found the letter Elias had written her the morning after the crash, the one he never gave her. It had been tucked inside an old seed ledger, forgotten but not lost. She opened it slowly. The handwriting was rough, as if the words had come faster than the pen could keep up. Asterisk Celeste. If you leave tomorrow, know that meeting you cracked open something in me I thought was long gone. If you stay, even just for another day, know that I'll spend it being grateful for a chance I never expected. I don't ask for forever, but if the road ever brings you back, you'll find me here. Still listening to the earth. Still waiting. Asterisk. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't sad. They were the kind that came when life, in all its chaos, finally made sense. The road had brought her back. Not by force, not by chance, but by choice. Again and again. Years later, long after Alina grew into a fierce young woman with the soul of her mother and the quiet strength of her father, the barn still stood. Weathered now, but proud. It had become more than shelter. It was history. It had housed dreams, sheltered storms, echoed with laughter and the cries of new life. Visitors came from across the country to see the valley, to hear the story of the architect and the farmer. Some were dreamers looking for hope. Others were tired souls seeking silence. All of them left with a little more than they came with. And on quiet evenings, when the wind slipped through the fields just right, Elias and Celeste would sit beneath the willow tree, watching the sky fade from gold to indigo. No grand words were needed. Their story was not one of epic battles or loud climaxes. It was made of glances across fields, the softness of shared burdens, the healing that happens in quiet places. It was the kind of love that didn't burn like fire, but glowed constant and warm, like the hearth at home. And in that glow, everything grew.